Good afternoon, Wex YouTube people. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Stuart Dennis. I'm one of the Pro Video specialists here at Wex. And today I am delighted that we will be doing a seminar on a subject that a lot of us think maybe we do know quite a bit about, but actually we don't, and that's recording professional sound for audio. We all know our cameras, we all know our lenses, we all know our lighting, but we're not all great with videos, with audio rather. So I'm delighted to say that I've got Ross Gill with me this afternoon from Creative Fire. He's the CEO of that company. They are a creative agency covering a wide range of video content creation. Welcome, Ross.
Hey.
How are you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, good. Good. It's here in the studio, and the sun's kind of coming out a bit. So
a bit windy where you are?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit, but it's all good. And it's been a while. It's a while since I've been able to hang out with you guys in person, obviously, with this year we've had. So it's nice to catch up with you here.
For anyone watching right now, you may have met Ross before. We did some audio masterclasses in our Whitechapel showroom. Back when we could do things like that. Yeah. Remember that? That was really, really popular, and it was a lot of hands-on with different types of microphones, and a real guide to understanding what audio actually means in video. So I'm really looking forward to doing that again with you this afternoon, but in this more sort of virtual sense.
Yeah, exactly. And let's do it in person again one day, hopefully.
Indeed. So I understand you have a presentation for us. And I guess. Yeah, I'll let you take it away, introduce who you guys are and what your background and sound is, and then we'll go through. And I'll probably interrupt you along the way with my own questions. We've also got questions coming from our actual YouTube guys as well, people who are watching, viewers, sorry, remember the word. Those guys will probably have some questions. For the guys who are watching right now, please ask your questions. If they're relevant to the part of the presentation we're on, we'll probably answer them as we go. If they are perhaps a little more esoteric, then we will leave them towards the end of the seminar and address them there. If we don't get to address them, then remember you can always email me at provideo@wex.co.uk, and you'll end up talking to me and I will give you the answers that way instead. So yeah, Ross, take it away.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and it's genuinely fun to be here and interact with people, be it through a screen, which is kind of our lives these days. But yeah, when the guys called me up and said about doing this, and also doing this with Sennheiser, who I love and been using Sennheiser stuff for decades, genuinely. So yeah, it just seemed like a no-brainer. A little bit about me. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Global Fire Creative. We kind of started as a production house, and we've kind of emerged or evolved into a kind of full creative agency, but definitely our strength is video and audio with some animation and photography as well. My background in sounds, or my journey into sound is actually a little bit different to some. I actually started in the more pro audio music world. So I used to, growing up, I worked in recording studios and produce artists, etc. So go for it, yeah.
So you've come from a background that's more purely audio than it was visual.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, so I guess that gives you, well, first of all, obviously a fantastic grounding in audio. Did you find that hard to adapt that knowledge over to something that involved visual, or was it quite a natural step?
A bit of both, really. So like I say, I worked in a recording studio, and even through my teens, I would make the tea at any recording studio that would let me be there to make the tea. And I was like that annoying kid. That was what, while people were out partying, I was just trying to upskill as much as I can. One of my best friends, Craig, who's now my business partner at Global Fire, we grew up both being into extreme sports. So we used to go mountain biking, BMXing, skateboarding, and that turned into getting quite old, crappy camcorders and making videos.
Fantastic.
So what happened is we'd film ourselves doing these awful tricks badly, normally falling off, and that kind of thing that was in the 80s and 90s. But I was always a musician at heart. I played in bands and had record deals and toured, which turned into recording stuff. Craig, on the other hand, was a cinema. He was the camera guy. He was a cinema photographer. He went to the New York Film Academy. And so what happened was he started making films, short films, etc. And he asked me to do the sound for them. So I would do the sound, do the Foley. I would compose bits of score for it at my studio. And also I was in the music industry. So I was like producing bands and getting him in to come and do the music videos and the documentaries. And that's actually how the company was born.
Wow, that's fantastic. Do you think back in those days, the cameraman understood the importance of sound, or it was something that you ended up teaching them?
I think a mix, really. I think experienced camera guys appreciate sounds, and they've normally learnt the hard way. And it probably goes both ways, I think, as well. Certainly for me, I think the learning curve as a recording studio is a very controlled environment. It's normally had quite a lot of money invested in keeping unwanted sound out and treating it to sound good. So you can your mic choice is down to kind of creative choices. This might sound good, that might sound good. And so my first kind of big shoot, we formed the company and we started getting some corporate jobs, some stuff with actors, like dramas and stuff. And suddenly I was thrown into environments that weren't great for sounds. So that was where the steep learning curve started. Right. But so thankfully, I had a bit of an understanding over how different microphones worked. So I was able to narrow it down fairly quickly what might be the best approach.
It's being taken from that comfort zone of being in a controlled recording studio, being thrown out into the real world where you have cars and airplanes and other people talking,
exactly,
and wind and everything else that's there as well,
and
even to react to what's going on around you.
Exactly, and so most of you guys watching are probably filming in corporate offices, at homes, in music venues, on the streets. And to be honest, even a lot of film studios, sound stages, they're not sound treated in a way that a music studio would be. They've often got big green screen, hard surfaces, curved walls.
High ceilings as well.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things to echo off, along with things echoing in the distance. Of gaffers throwing lights off trucks and
exactly right. And buzz and all sorts. And lots of people trying to be quiet. So basically, we got our first job up near Lavalier, London, with a really cool organisation called Steps Drama, and they've got great actors. All the guys we worked on that project about 12 years ago, I see them all in movies and TV stuff now. They're a great little company, drama group, and they've gone to do great stuff. So we were filming all of these series of videos with them, which were dramatizations to do with diversity and inclusion. And so I had all of these microphones in my studio, which were not really suitable for that environment. So I genuinely, the first thing I went and did is I called all my camera buddies who I knew. I've been a producer and an artist, so I knew lots of people who'd done documentaries that I'd been in. So I phoned everyone up, and the first mic I bought was this mic right here, which is why I put it on this C-stand, which is a Sennheiser shotgun microphone.
Which one is that?
It's the original, the what do you call it? The MK.
416?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So I can pop that there. You can see that. It's a bit worse. It's a bit worse for wear. The duct tape and stuff.
Well, it's something I've learned over the years is that audio kit is enduring.
Absolutely. That's actually one thing. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about today, actually.
Yeah.
Got the dead cat on there. So I bought this probably about 15 years ago for that first shoot or whenever it was. And then the other thing I bought was a bunch of things that look like this.
Aha.
So these are the
industry standard radio
industry standards. Yeah. This is these are the original. Well, probably not the original, but these were the G2s, which were the current ones at the time. I think they're on 4 or 5 now, I think.
Yeah. Well, when I started in the industry, which I think was like I say, I think it was on the 6th of January 2006.
Yeah.
That was the G2 series was the one that everybody was buying at that point.
Exactly.
We're on the G4 or 5 now, I think.
Exactly right. And other stuff that's not G anything as well.
And the mic has stayed the same the whole time. It's been the ME3 microphone. So
exactly. So I actually dug these out of my kit room because I want to say this was genuinely my entry point into the industry, amongst other things. So that was it. And so on was the journey of figuring out how to do something that I kind of knew how to do, but in very different environments.
Fantastic. Well, Ross, let's dive in and check out what you put together for us today. I understand you're going to explain some of the different kinds of microphones, what goes into an audio setup, some of the accessories that people use, along with different setups, shooting different scenarios, etc., and understanding some of the terminology that goes around it. So, looking forward to it, and I'm sure everyone else is as well. We're already getting questions, but great. I think we'll wait for the questions I'm seeing so far to do them at the end, I think.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Keep the questions coming, but Stu, feel free to butt in, and there's no bad questions. So
cool.
If I can answer, I will.
Good stuff.
So yeah, recording professional video for sounds. I've kind of covered a little bit about us, but we're a small team, about 10 people, and kind of got skills there. You can see me in the top left there, and that's my business partner, Craig, that I mentioned before, who we started the company together. Wide range of services, sounds, camera. 2 of our guys are drone pilots. We also have illustrators, photographers, etc. So, kind of talked about the background. Like we say, I really want to go into different microphones today because I think one of learning how to use a microphone for sure, but what I observe is some of the biggest problems that people run into is sometimes maybe not using the correct microphone for the correct job. I'm very aware that sometimes that means having to invest in more than one microphone, and we all have different levels of affordability. But if you understand that, then that might even help people make the best decision on the mic. Sure, if you can only afford 1 or 2 microphones, then you need to really understand what you're buying. Basically,
I think that's a really good point. And there are so many microphones now, particularly as there are so many devices to use.
Yes.
Some of the questions that we'll see through this session is that I think we'll start to discover that the traditional world of an XLR ended microphone isn't where it ends these days.
No. Yeah.
Mirrorless cameras. We have phones. Some people are using for content creation as well. So there's not just a number of different microphones, but a number of different devices that we can use and different methods of delivering content.
Exactly. External recorders, mixers. So I want to get into that and talk about what you should use in different, why understanding what to use and when really, I think, empowers us to do that. So often cameras are great, and you can get a camera now for almost pennies that can shoot a great video compared to the cameras even 10 years ago that you had to buy.
Insane. It's absolutely insane how good cameras are now. Not just in terms of their resolution, their data rates, their frame rate options, but most of all, the thing that we see, I think, the most is things like dynamic range, for example, where we can shoot with a small handheld camcorder and get results that would have taken a £100,000 cine camera.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. We're talking 10 years ago, 5-10 grand would get you something pretty amateur. But do you know what I mean, compared to what you can get now for a mirrorless camera for 500 quid, you can get something quite beautiful, which is fantastic. So what is bad audio? That's kind of where we want to start. What is bad audio? And often it's, no matter how, I think we all know, no matter how good your picture looks, if the audio is not great, it's just so distracting. I'd almost prefer good sound and bad video, almost, in some scenarios at least, depending on what it is. And I think, for me, I think the definition of bad audio is something distracting you. And the distracting element could be, is that something in the background, or is it just that you're not getting high enough resolution of your main thing? But as soon as you're thinking there's not something right with that audio, then people's user experience goes down infinitely, in my opinion. So when we talk about microphones and environments, we're going to be talking about different tricks on how to get a better source sound, but also how to isolate sound that you don't want. So that's what we'll be chatting about. There's some really cool quotes here that I've always loved. George Lucas, sound is 50% of the movie going experience. Danny Boyle, 70 to 80% of a movie is sounds. You don't realize it because you don't see it. And one of my favorite ones here, because obviously media now is video games, it's everything, is sound is what truly convinces the mind is that you're in that place. In other words, hearing is believing. So it's that sounds that really embeds the environment, embeds, you know, the belief in what you're actually watching.
The quotes from three people who know what they're talking about as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think these guys probably are worth listening to. Audio essentials. So yeah, I've just put here, it's not all about equipment. Better understanding and practice will get you better results. And there's a famous saying in photography that's, you know, the best camera is the camera that you have on you. And that's kind of true with a microphone, in the sense that, you know, if you only have one microphone or two microphones, you know, there's still lots of tricks you can do to get the most out of it. I think probably one of the most underrated and under-discussed thing with audio is actually monitoring it. So people will buy a £100 to £300 microphone, maybe £1,000 microphone, stick it on top of their camera, and then they'll use very cheap headphones. I regularly see camera guys with their GH5 or their Blackmagic, whatever, using their Apple Apple headphones or whatever. One, they don't really perform in the way that you're meant to when you're dealing with raw audio. But more importantly for me, they just don't isolate you from your environment. And so, I mean, you can see this picture here, the Sennheiser in-ear headphones. They're great. Some of them actually have detachable cables. So if you knacker the cable, you can replace the cable without having to spend a fortune on your drivers. But the most important thing about this style of headphones is that it really blocks out the sound of your environment, which is essential, because then you can be more sure what you're actually hearing. So I would say that's like 101 and often misunderstood. You can see the shot here of my business partner, Craig, using them with that camera there, you know, actually really going to hear what you're doing. So yeah.
Well, I think, you know, I've always been brought up to understand that Sennheiser HD25s are the industry standard. And you mentioned that you can get replaceable cables, replaceable headbands, replaceable pads, etc. So they, even though they might seem like quite a hefty investment to start with, they are just that, an investment. You can continually add to them, continually repair them, and if those are too expensive, then they do some more budget versions as well. Because one of the most important things that people are going to need to know with headphones is that it needs to, they are monitoring headphones. They're not designed to make the sound better. They're designed to sound exactly how it's being recorded. That's one of the most important things. And if you use consumer level headphones, or earphones, they are designed to make your music sound good. You know, things
like mega bass, extended bass response. That's great when you're playing a video game or watching a movie, but you don't want that. So yeah, something like, I mean, you can get headphones like these that start, Sennheiser ones that start about 50 quid, I think, you know, and they go up to as much as you want. But stuff that's really going to isolate your environment is the, and then secondly to that is actually using something at least half decent when you're editing. So, you know, no matter how good or expensive your MacBook or your PC is that you're doing your editing on, 9 times out of 10, the built-in speakers aren't showing you fully what's going on. So getting some kind of home studio level monitors, or even some bigger hi-fi speakers that have got a bigger frequency range, you're going to hear if there's a lorry driving past and there's a rumble, if you're listening on speakers that aren't even going to pick that out, then you're not going to be able to deal with that. So yeah, audio essentials. I think here is about never stop learning, never think that you know it all. And I'm coming back to the headphones thing. If you can hear what's going on, even if you haven't got a degree in this or whatever, if you can hear it, then you can start the process of at least trying to figure it out. You can move your microphone. You can say, no, that sounds better. That sounds worse, and actually play around. And that's the one thing that you don't get if you're not hearing properly, if that makes sense. So yeah, one of the defining decisions with this, probably one of the biggest decisions that we'll discuss today, I put use a sound guy when possible. And I say that because sometimes that's not possible, and sometimes you're by yourself, and you haven't got any money, or it's a personal project, and that's actually will sometimes dictate the kit you use as well. So yeah, we'll cover that. But that's I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, but that's one thing I often suggest to people.
The sound card question.
Yes.
It's not some.
No, sorry, use a sound guy. Sorry.
Oh, sound guy. Using a sound guy. Well, I'd always recommend that they hire a guy like you to do the sound side of things.
Or even just a friend.
Yeah, sure. If you speak to people at film schools, it tends to be their mate, doing it.
Exactly.
But it's for sure we're going to discover, I think, with the questions that we're going to read through, that there's a number of one-man band shooters out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Who are going to have to do a lot of this themselves.
Most of us are these days. And the final thing before we get to the cameras and everything else is this is the other thing I think is really important to consider, is use the correct stuff when you're recording and when you're editing, but when you're going to actually put something out there, whether it's on YouTube or online or higher ends, have a think about what actually people are going to be listening it to, and that's a great time to then check it on your laptop. I mean, to be honest, most of us are watching stuff like on our phones now, you know, and our AirPods, our TVs, gone are the days of £10,000 hi-fi separate systems now. Generally people using little Bluetooth speakers and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, use before you put something out there, reference it on stuff that people are actually going to be listening to it on. That's something that's helped me a lot.
The same goes for the visual side of things as well. The amount of people that we speak to who, we can look at, investing in expensive HDR monitors, etc. But at the end of the day, what's the likely delivery method? What are people going to be watching it on?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to think about really is our environment. This is a shoot we did for. This was a couple of years ago. This was the CEO of Vodafone at the time, and he just took over the company and had this big plan. And this was the only space that we could get, which was a huge event space, quite echoey, and quite typical of real life. You don't get to choose where you can film stuff sometimes. And so background noise. And I think the main thing here is, especially if you're a self-shooter, the first thing I do on any shoot is I'll literally get everything set up. I'll turn away from my monitor or close my eyes and actually really listen on my headphones first. Because it's amazing when you're looking how you can, we're experts at drowning out stuff in the background. We don't really hear the train going past. We don't really hear the traffic. If you're in an office or a shop or something, you probably haven't even noticed that aircon unit that's ticking away in the corner. And so I think the first thing I'll try and do is to actually, I'll even take notes sometimes of things I might have to deal with, and I'll actually just sit there, I'll close my eyes and actually almost like test myself. How many things can I hear in the room? And then I'll try and see what I can do to deal with it. If there's an aircon unit, can I find out who's able to turn that off for a little while? If there's traffic outside, so go and shut that window, even if that means you might get a bit hot. So
is that something that leads you to record ambient sound in there as well, so that you have that sort of sound bed that you could use?
Absolutely, yeah. So the ambient sound. I mean, we call that Foley sounds, or a wild track. Generally, we call it.
I've heard it referred to as Atmos as well.
Atmos, yeah, great. I know we always call it a wild track back in the day. I'm sure.
Wild track.
A wild track. So generally, what we'll do is, once you've got a sense of the space, especially if you're filming, if you want to have a continuous shot or something you're going to chop up, or someone talking like an interview style, a documentary, then generally what you do is, once you've got your sound right, tell everybody to be quiet in a polite way. and actually record a few minutes of your sound in that room. That's going to help smooth out your edits if you're cutting between people talking and whatever else. But like I say, anything you don't want, listen first and see if you can isolate, see if you can somehow reduce those things by mic placement, but also by literally shutting windows. If it's quite echoey, like I've got a bunch of I did a shoot recently where we hired an Airbnb place. It was a lounge. It was all hard wooden floors and walls. I just went to Asda and I went and bought 10 super cheap duvets, and I just put them all over the floor that wasn't in shot, and it just dampens the room down massively. So you can never see them, but they really help sort that room out.
Yeah. Do you take any kit with you that would do something like that? Just standardly, like any kind of fabric or anything like that?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got a big suitcase full of like black fabric, like that you would use at events. Often a couple of big rugs, and if it's a real problem, we'll actually sometimes we've got these baffle boards that are on wheels that you can wheel around. But again, if you're getting on the tube with your backpack, that's not really possible. So a big blanket or a duvet or anything like that, you can take in a little suitcase.
All the soft furnishings you can find.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that is so I mean, this is an extension of the kind of places you might find yourself filming in, and really doing whatever you can to solve those issues. And I think just being really confident as well. Don't be afraid to ask people to speak a bit louder if you need to. Sometimes we often have this mentality of, we'll just fix it in the edit, we'll fix it in the mix. But if we can get it right in camera, the sooner we can get it right in camera, the better. So recording at the right level is probably the next big thing then, really. So all equipment, and this is probably the one thing, to be honest, where these amazing cameras that have got mini jacks in is probably the one area where they fall down a little. So a more high-end camera that has big XLR. For those of you who don't know what XLR is, let me just grab a cable here. An XLR is your much more conventional microphone cable that sticks on. So some cameras have a decent XLR input, which means it often means it's got a much higher end preamp, which normally means it's quieter. So when you plug in your noise floor, so when you have your GH5 or whatever camera you have, when you turn that volume up, you're going to hear a bit of a hum or a hiss or a kind of ground level. No preamp is quiet, and the better the preamp gets, the quieter it will be. And so the main thing we want to do to combat that is to get your source audio louder than your equipment's base noise floor. And so this is where it's really important to, if someone's talking a bit quietly, or if your mic's not quite close enough, that's the one time where it's not quite as simple as saying, I'll just turn it up when I edit it. Because when you turn it up, you're going to be turning up that hiss and that noise in the thing. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake a lot of people often make.
It's almost like the audio equivalent of underexposing.
Exactly.
Underexposing at a low bit depth.
Yes.
That's basically the way I would think about it. It's like taking like old 8-bit S-Log footage from an older Sony camera and shooting it a stop under and then trying to raise it all up again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everything noisy. So
exactly. Yeah. It's perfect. So, so guys will understand that. So you don't want it clipping, obviously, but you don't want it to be too quiet.
Sure.
So our optimum level, obviously nearly all cameras here have got some kind of audio meter. We really want to be somewhere between kind of -18 to -12, somewhere around there, and peaking at about -6. So when someone's at their loudest, and I often get, if I'm filming someone in an interview, I normally get them to speak as loud as they're going to speak. Okay. Which is often. Sometimes when people do a test, they're just like test 1 2 1 2, and that's not actually how loud they'll be speaking on that thing. So somewhere in this range, -12 dB average, peaking at 6 dB is perfect. That's going to be louder than most preamps, most noise. Going to get a really strong signal. If someone's at the back of a warehouse and you want it to sound like they're in a big warehouse, then fine. But if you want to have good, punchy, clear audio, this is kind of where you want to be.
Good. And that's about average for most cameras.
Yeah, exactly right. If for audio in general, that's kind of where we want to be. Yeah, that you've got a bit of, you're not clipping them, but it's loud enough that it's going to be punchy, and you've got enough headroom there that you can crank it in your software without having problems.
Cool.
So yeah, it's external recorders. Sometimes these are great. When this whole DSLR mirrorless revolution happens, these were kind of essential because cameras literally didn't even have things like headphone outs or anything. But really, the main reason to use something, obviously here you can see the Sennheiser. There's mics that you can pair with your phone, so you can have the mic on the person. And I think the main thing, just to think, the main time to do this is really if you can't get your microphone connected to your camera and be close enough. Examples of this maybe if you're running if your camera's on a gimbal, a Ronin S or whatever else, you probably don't want a big.
For sure.
You probably you don't want a wireless thing, or it might be that you just need you got something much further off, or you're filming multiple kind of scenarios. So I think this is a really important thing to consider. Is that a better option?
We still see it being used. I see it being used more with customers who, that dare I say, take their sound quite seriously. So obviously something like the DR70 that we just looked at, which goes underneath a camera, or the other Tascam or any of the Zoom recorders we do as well. They're not always practical for someone who's running and gunning. So that's where we see it be a little bit more useful. I know of a Nikon shooter who's actually using the Tascam DR70 at the moment because he wants the quality of a ProRes RAW file, but he needs the quality of the Tascam audio file at the same time.
Exactly. And I think the other thing to say with this is they're quite affordable, and they're awesome if you need to record more than 2 sources. Because most small cameras, in fact, are there any mirrorless cameras that can do more than a stereo in? I'm not sure. There may be.
I wouldn't call them mirrorless cameras. You get this. There's a camera type in the middle now. You're kind of the sort of Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, 6K Pose, the Canon C70s. They're kind of somewhere between a mirrorless and a cinema camera.
I use a pocket camera as my everyday camera. So most of these smaller format cameras have limited audio inputs and connectivity. A bigger camera, even like an FS6 or 7, can record up to like 4 or 6 inputs at the same time, etc. So, for example, this Tascam can record up to 4 microphones at the same time. So, if you're doing a podcast where you want 4 people chatting, then this is your answer, for example. So, mixers is a similar kind of thing. So, again, that's I won't dwindle that too much. Now, probably one of the things, probably the most iconic thing in camera sound is the guy with the boom pole. Like every movie, every news show, it's and we've all seen those things where it like accidentally dips in shot, etc. And I think that's what I wanted to come to is, and I think that's probably the other mistake that even I've made, is that there's so many of these amazing microphones, which is what we're going to chat about next. But a lot of them, when you see them in promotional shots, they're often with the cold shoe mounted on the camera, mounted on the rig. And so I think for a lot of people, that's the default. It's like, oh, this is my camera. The cable's only just long enough to reach the camera. So that must be where it needs to go. And I think that's probably the biggest thing to think about is really we want to be able to get often we need to get our microphone a lot closer to the subjects than on the camera. Unless you're right in someone's face doing a piece to cam or something. And so a boom pole is a great option. Again, you can do this by yourself, but you unless you're very clever, you probably need to have your camera on tripod, which might not be the kind of shot you want. Many times I will put my shotgun mic on a stand like this, so I can have it above, out of shot, near the person. Nice long cable, and you can do it. One of my favorite toys is are these things. Little Sennheiser. It's like a block essentially.
Oh, plug-on transmitter.
Yeah, plug-on transmitter. Sure. So it's an XLR. It means you can plug in all your big microphones into that, and then tune it into your.
It's an SKP something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, they plug straight onto the base of a powered microphone and then let you use it like a wireless mic.
Yeah, so I'll often attach this to a microphone and I can have it miles away, and it's hidden somewhere. So yeah, so I think the pole's a great option. Obviously the and so with your smaller microphones, it's about having at least getting an extension cable, getting that microphone as close to your person as you can, hide it under a cushion, just get it nearer to them, basically.
Sure. Looks like you've got some best practice here for actually recording dialogue, which looks interesting. Yeah.
So this is kind of really this stereo image. So I think this is the first thing really is there's all these top microphones, and really they're kind of two types. Other than there's different, we're going to talk about microphone pickup patterns, but aside from that, we've got stereo microphones and we've got mono microphones. And really, generally speaking, unless you've got lots of people, a mono microphone, your standard kind of shotgun microphone, is a great choice for someone talking, because we really want to be able to separate them. We'll separate from the space. You might want to be able to choose where they are in the mix when you're doing your edit. And so generally speaking, not to use a stereo microphone for dialogue, although rules are there to be broken. It's just great to you just want to understand the rules first to do that. And so a stereo microphone is generally better for getting your Foley sounds, getting your environments, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
the ambient sound of the environment that you're in.
Yeah. Exactly right. So if I was to buy two microphones, it'd be a stereo microphone and a Kylo shotgun microphone. Which leads us on to here.
Cool. This is the stuff that I think I know well and probably don't. But shotgun mics, lavalier mics, radio mics. These are the ones that I think people search for the most. So
exactly
let's go through them.
So within each microphone, we've got different types. Shotgun mic, like you say, we've got generally speaking, shotgun mics need power because they're they've got a capsule in there that needs power, like a kind of condenser microphone. And so most of them have the option to have a battery in. Some of them, like this one on the left here, the 600, that needs that one can be powered by phantom power. So some cameras, even some of these more mid-sized ones, like a Blackmagic pocket camera, are even starting to be able to offer things like phantom power, which is amazing. Although that will deplete your camera's battery quite quickly. So the thing about a shotgun mic is they're very directional. They reject other sounds, so they'll generally pick up what you point it at, which is often what you want, especially if you're in noisy environments. The kind of myth about shotgun mics is that you can kind of point them anywhere and they'll pick them up. Shotgun mics still actually need to be quite close to get a good sound. And I think that's the one thing, that's the mistake I made. That first job I had, I was like, oh, shotgun mic, great. And it would still pick up a lot of the room, just in the direction I was choosing.
It's funny enough, it's actually one of the questions that came up was about, in particular, I think it was the MKE 600, which is one of the microphones microphone that essentially replaces the old ME 66. And it was about how directional it is. And I think one of the answer to that question really, I guess, is that each shotgun mic is a little bit more directional.
Exactly.
Than the last.
I'm going to cover pickup patterns in a minute, so you actually see
cool.
the difference in that. And then the smaller version of this, which is essentially the same family. So we can, And then we're going to lav mics. So lav mics, obviously, they can be plugged into wireless packs, but you can run lav mics straight into phones and cameras with the right gadgets. Obviously, the great thing about them is they're right on your person, right where you're sticking it. Mm-hmm. They can be wireless, they can be hidden, but they're not all the same still. So even here, we've got a couple that's the one that's more on the kind of classic ME2 here on the left, which is the one that's been around for years that I've owned, is still a bit more omnidirectional. It's right near your source, so it's pretty good. But you can get a more cardioid closed path, narrower path version as well, which is there. So it's still great to have the choice to have one that's got a wider pickup pattern and a closer pickup pattern. And then obviously we've obviously got wireless packs, and there's a great range of those now, and they're really, really small. And I think the main thing to kind of think about there is often people want the microphone concealed, but that does actually impact the sound to a degree, because it actually muffles the sound as well. So sometimes you have to have an extra shotgun mic, or maybe actually enhance it in post to be able to bring out some of that clarity again.
Okay, cool. I've just checked with our organizer whether we can run over time a little bit, because we probably will run over time, and we are allowed to. So
okay, great.
We can go through these in detail. So
super.
Just in terms of, I'm wearing a lav mic right now. I'm wearing one of the Sennheiser ones that's in this picture. And if I were to try to cover it up, you said it would get muffled. Obviously, you've got a picture of some stickies made by Ryco. We also do some overcovers, some undercovers, and we also do some other basically wind protection for them as well. I think that there's an understanding that once you use something like a lav mic, it's going to be on display. Someone's going to be able to see that.
Yeah.
And one of the questions, and this is really a question for me, and maybe we'll go through it in the presentation, is if you have two actors who are walking towards you from a distance, and we're not doing a news report, we're doing something drama based, are they likely to be wearing a lav mic, or is that they are? Okay.
Yeah, so generally speaking, there's all types out there, but generally speaking, obviously a lot of sound does get redone in post, etc. We all know that. You watch Star Wars, you're not hearing Mark Hamill talk on the set often, because sets are horribly noisy places. They have wind machines and generators, but yeah, the kind of stuff we're talking about, they are hidden, and we use things like these stickies. But to be honest, if you talk to most pro sound guys, there's still a fair bit of DIY involved. So there's often, because as soon as you put a microphone under a t-shirt, then you're getting rustle. So often on big shoots, we find ourselves you wrapping mics in bits of tissue or foam, and then tape, and then generally they'll be actually taped to your skin. So find a tape that's safe to do that. but generally that's the approach. In fact, I've got a little example here. So if I go to here, can you see that there?
I can still see the presentation.
Okay. Let's I obviously have to change the selection. Let's try this now. Here we go. Okay, cool. I know what I need to do. This is my first time using Zoom for this kind of thing.
That's cool. This is the joys of live production, everybody.
Yeah, exactly right. Share sounds. There we go. Should have changed now.
Yep, sure. I can see the beginnings of a Vimeo video.
So this is a recent video that we shot for Vodafone, called Vodability, and we filmed it in the woods. The whole thing was shot on an A7, I believe, on a Ronin, and then we had a Sennheiser wireless pack recording onto a external recorder that was in the guy's back pocket. so it could just be completely separate. And so this is you'll hear the sound now, and this was the mic underneath his hoodie, so it's completely hidden.
Traditionally, disability conjures imagery of what's seen visibly, but this feels like it's physically killing me, hidden in invisibility. Do you know the strength it takes for me to fight this pain I feel inside each day, intensified by sleepless nights, rolled eyes and sighs?
So there we go, we can hear his voice. Yeah. It's coming through quite clearly. If I switch to, if I now switch to the original, the rough cut, for want of a better word, and you'll hear, in reality, what often they, if you confirm, you can see the trees there.
I can see the trees.
Great. So this is I managed to find the rough cut there.
Yeah.
And so this is the untreated audio without the extra shotgun microphone.
Yeah.
So it does add some punchiness to the sound because it's so close, but we have had to compensate for the fact that it's under his hoodie. So here you go.
Traditionally, disability conjures imagery of what's seen visibly, but this feels like it's physically killing me, hidden in invisibility. Do you know the strength it...
Wow. So yeah, there's definitely a sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but almost like a thickness to the sound.
Exactly, yeah.
The second version, just off one mic, was thin.
Yeah, it's it's almost like they're in the next room or there's a blanket over someone's head, because that is what we've done. So, but we've managed to enhance it in post by putting some of those frequencies back. Again, a bit like the exposure analogy, you can only do that to a degree. And then with a bit of extra support from an external microphone, which just adds some of that. If you listen to it in isolation, it's got a bit too much space to that sound, but it puts back some of that fidelity, some of those high frequencies. So the two together gets us there, if that makes sense.
Fantastic.
And so
that was beautifully shot as well, I must say. So well done, guys.
Great. Yeah, it was a really nice project and for a great cause as well. Great. Let's go back to.
It'd be great if we could share these with our viewers afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. In fact, we've worked with Vodafone for years, and they do so much in the space of diversity and inclusion. And so, yeah, big up to them. And we've been really pleased to be working with them in these projects. So
great. Well, let's give it a plug at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So you can see at the bottom there, concealing and then enhancing with EQ or an additional mic. And that's really just because we want to get as much out sound as we can.
Sure.
So yeah, and obviously you can hear on there was no rustling of his hoodie or that kind of thing. More microphones. So the next type of microphone is really what we call like a dynamic microphone. There are smaller dynamic microphones, but they're also this kind of more handheld style. It's more the kind of style microphone you'll often see like a reporter using, or maybe a musician singing.
We used to call it a reporter's mic.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
and so these are great. I just wanted to cover all bases. I know this is not the creative video option, but if you want someone talking in a noisy crowd at a festival and everything else, it's got such a narrow area that's going to pick up on. You can get it really close here. You can move it to this person. It really is a great option when it's a great thing to have in your kit, and will get you out of that situation. It's less susceptible to winds. It's fantastic.
Yeah, you can put your branding on it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
If you are working for a station. So
you often see like the MTV or the BBC or Wex or whatever. I think I've got a Global Fire one somewhere.
I think we've got Wex one somewhere as well.
But yeah, so. I think I've seen them. Yeah. So they need to be close. You're not duct taping this under your t-shirt for sure. and then the final thing is lovely big fat condenser microphones, which which sound fantastic. Yeah. You get so much more detail in the voice and clarity than you would on most production microphones. More because you're generally using them at home or in a studio or in your bedroom, so you can turn them up louder. You haven't got traffic and whatever else. So if you're doing something where you want to add a voiceover, either with yourself or someone else, condenser microphones are another thing that are really affordable now compared to what they used to be. They started really great. Most people have seen these screens, so you can pick up screens very cheaply to help cover them. But they are so sensitive that often you need a thing called a pop shield, which just stops those. So yeah,
it stops the P's and the T's that you pronounce naturally hitting the microphone.
Exactly right. Yeah. So these are the kind of mythical words that are often associated with microphones that you can kind of half figure out, but I won't lie, they used to mystify me when I was younger in my studio days. So every microphone has what we call a capsule. A capsule is the area of the microphone that picks up the sounds. This really helps. Looking at this really helps you choose which mic you want to have. Omnidirectional means it's not biased in any way. It's going to fairly evenly pick out the sound in most directions.
My Lavalier microphone is an omnidirectional microphone, I believe.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's great because you're there, but that might be challenging in some situations. If you're the camera guy, I mean, I've seen videos where you can even, if you've got an omnidirectional mic, I've even had to edit videos where you can hear like the camera guy breathing a bit or something like that. So remember, if it's pointing at them, it may be close to them, so they'll be louder, but it really is picking up. Bidirectional, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. It will point in two ways. Now, what this is great for is if you've got one microphone, you could use this to have two people talking, but it will actually cancel out people that are to the left and the right. So the camera guy, the traffic, but you can actually pick up two people, a podcast, a chat, a drama scenario. And then to be honest, the kind of, the two we're going to want most of the time is our cardioid and our ultra cardioid. Sometimes we call it hypercardioid. Yeah. And as you can see, the cardioid is really mostly forward and a little to the side. So you're going to get a quite nice full sound. And then you're going to get your ultra cardioid, which is kind of your hyper shotgun.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not plugged in at the moment, but if I moved it from here to here, the volume difference is huge. And so this is what you want to, if you take anything away from today with what mic do I use, just think about what type of mic it is in this chart, and then think about what you're filming.
Yeah.
What do I want to be picking up? Is this, do I want just what's in front of me, or do I want the sound from everywhere, or somewhere in between? So yeah.
Very helpful.
Should we keep moving on?
Yeah, sure. I'm looking at this slide, and it's one of the ones that I think for our users is very helpful.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, I really do.
So I think what's fantastic about smaller cameras or these medium-sized cameras is a lot of them have the option to have these extra blocks on top now. I think the Panasonic ones does. I know the Sony does. What's great about this is it gives us slightly better preamps, XLR inputs, but what it does do, it gives us greater control and also less not having to go into your not having to go through menus and things like that as well. So you can just quickly
How realistic or how often these days? I mean, obviously, as a professional sound recordist, I'm sure you will actually manually use the input levels on here.
Yeah.
I find that most of the users I tend to deal with are kind of auto.
Yeah.
Is that still an acceptable way of working, do you think, or is it it really comes down to the project and the situation?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think that there's no bad questions. I'm definitely not saying that there isn't a time for automatic sound, because if I say there isn't, then the comments will be 100 times where it is appropriate.
Yeah.
Personally for me, the only time I would use automatic sounds is maybe if it's a B camera where I just need reference audio that I know I'm gonna scrap, for sync. I think that the problem with automatic sound and a lot of devices, like your phone, this call, it's just managing that for us. And I mean, that's helpful in some practical applications. But I think the problem with automatic sound is you're letting your camera make decisions for you. Mm-hmm. And that's what you don't want to happen. Mm-hmm. Automatic sound it's doing kind of what limiting and compression does in one, and it's trying to make everything loud. It's the reason why when you're on your Skype or your Zoom call, and you're chatting to someone, and then their child or their friend drops a saucepan in the other room or shouts something. It's the reason why that's almost as loud as the person talking. Sure. And so the problem with automatic gain is you've got someone talking, and then when that car drives past the end of the road, it's going to try and make that almost as loud.
You also get those. We were talking about that noise floor earlier on, and what you don't get is consistency. When you're in auto, you'll have these very defined moments of noise reduction, where it will suddenly just sort of the sound will almost collapse in on itself until it's completely silent, and then it will come back again.
Exactly.
So it feels unnatural in that sense.
It really does, and it's also a nightmare to fix in post because you have to almost manually go through everything. So I would say, I think an auto thing is not always, but sometimes just a lack of knowledge and think I'm not sure, or maybe it's I've just got to be quick.
I think speed seems to be the what I hear the most. Obviously knowledge is probably part of it too.
Yeah, and maybe if you're at some expo where you're just doing reviews and chatting to people and you just need to get quick sound bites from people, maybe. But if it's picking up something crazy, I mean, use a great. I mean, listen, just actually listen and see if it's sounding good. But I think not. I think it's the same. It's the same reason why a new beta video might use auto white balance, and then a year or two later realize, that's like the worst thing you can do because it's constantly changing. It's the same thing.
It's a good comparison.
So try and stay in those audio that minus 12 to 18, peaking at 6. As long as you stay there, you'll be good, and you'll be able to work with that a lot better in post.
Good.
So yeah.
So these in-camera settings we've got on this particular slide here, we're talking about bit depth, and you're talking about kilohertz. Could you just give us a quick overview of what that means?
Yeah, exactly. So we're really talking. It's very much the same as the kind of compression that we're talking about video. It's the same kind of thing. It's the same reason why, if you're filming something in MP4 versus a ProRes, there's a lot more information, and so the higher the bit depth and the kilohertz, the more information we have. So I think everyone, probably not everyone, but people my age remember things like Sega Mega Drives and Super Nintendos, 8 and 16-bit video games consoles.
Mega Drive was 16-bit, I think.
There you go. Yeah, I'm sure I had an 8-bit Master System, was it, or something?
That was an 8-bit system.
Exactly. So it's a 24, sometimes 32 now. It's kind of very acceptable, industry standard. Right,
and the kilohertz is like the compression.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to keep that high. It's the same theory as recording, in a Blackmagic RAW or a ProRes
Sure.
And then export it as an MP4 or whatever it is your client wants, but get it in as high as you can because you've got that information to, to paint the same way you do with the grade. Yeah.
Great.
Some cameras vary in the ability they give you to change those settings, but make sure that you're kind of going either as high as you can or at a reasonable size.
There's some settings in this list here: channel select, attenuation, input type, auto, and low cut.
Yeah.
Could you very quickly just run through what each of those means?
Absolutely, yeah. So channel select, some cameras you can actually choose the channel. Other cameras just have a left and right in, so they'll record sounds to one and sound to the other. And as you know, even small cameras, you can get a little splitter, so you could actually record 2 mono microphones, and that will enable you to split those when you're editing to left and right. Attenuation is just volume, so we attenuate that up and down to the channel we want.
Okay.
Input type is really important because you can often, most cameras will enable you to set it to the type of source you've got. So generally speaking, for a microphone, then it will be, then you set it to mic. That seems obvious.
Yeah.
But there will be times, particularly live streaming and webcasting is becoming a bigger part of all of our lives. Yeah. And so that's really when you're taking a sound from something line level, which is typically something like maybe an audio mixer, or if you've got your camera at the back of an event, the back of a church or a gig or something, that's more that line level that you would get from a, yeah. And if you get those wrong, you'll know about it.
Okay.
Quickly.
Okay.
It'll either be way too quiet or it'll be really distorted.
Right.
And so the 48 volts is really just referring to the not all cameras, but some cameras have the ability to power a shotgun mic.
Sure.
A mic. Auto, we talked about. Don't have it. And then low cut. We are going to talk about frequencies on the next thing. So I'll cover that in a second. Yeah.
Cool.
And I think these are the last things really is kind of, we talked about what's the right polar pattern for your microphone? What is the right microphone in the first place? Let's get it as high res as possible. And then I think the final thing, which I'm always surprised at, is the amount of times I see great camera guys just adjust all their audio so it's about the right level so you can hear it, and that's enough. But there's actually a lot more we can do to kind of manipulate the sound once we're in post. The reason I skipped the low cut setting on here, so a lot of microphones have a low cut filter option, which can be good. And what that is doing is that's filtering frequencies to a low setting. Most microphones are fixed, or there might be a setting of 1 or 2 settings. If you can see this diagram here at the bottom, that's really what a low cut curve looks like. So you can see here there's 100 hertz and 40 hertz. That's very low. That's not a human speaking range. We're talking about traffic rumble, motorways. So a little low cut curve is not a terrible thing. The only thing I would say is, same with your camera stuff, it's hard to put stuff back in.
Sure. So
if you've got any doubt, go for a safe filter, or it's something you can do in post.
Okay.
That makes sense.
That's good advice. Very good advice.
A compressor is a great thing to use in post, because once you've chopped out all your quiet bits and done everything, what it can do is it can just keep all your talking a little bit more level if that's something that you want. And then reverb, actually, if you've got a microphone really close to someone, sometimes you might think, actually, I'm filming them in a big office. You might want it to sound like they are in a slightly bigger space. And again, reverb is something really hard to take out of a recording, but it's really easy to add again later if you just want to add a hint of it to make it sound like they are in a bigger space. And then normalizing is something that can really help if you've gone a bit wild and turned your mic up a bit and then forgotten and turned it down a bit and got different challenges. Normalizing is something that will go through and it will just match all of your peaks. So again, it's a bit of a cleaner way than compressing and helping do it. And then this is the final thing. This chart is something that's really helpful. It's talking through frequency. So when you a lot of people open the EQ plugin in their DaVinci or their Premiere or Final Cut, but they're just kind of numbers that can be quite daunting. So this chart is something that's just really helpful to help you isolate out different things that you might want. So first, somewhere around the kind of 20, 30, 40 hertz is what we describe as kind of rumble. So like, low frequencies in the back. 63 hertz, we're kind of getting into low ends. And then 125 hertz, we're kind of starting to get towards a kind of thump and warmth. 250 is that kind of fullness. 500 is that kind of honky, kind of honky nasally kind of sound. So it's something, so you can kind of dip that up or down. 1K is like a kind of real quite sharp sounds. Kind of, and then we're getting to kind of high, kind of crunchy, edgy, and sibilant kind of sounds. So if you feel that your audio is too muddy, or a bit nasally, or a bit too airy and wispy, then this is a great chart to kind of pinpoint the frequencies that you might want to turn up or down, depending on whether there's not too much or not enough of them.
That's a really interesting list. I'd never seen that before. As I mentioned, not an audio specialist.
A great thing to do is just take your audio and play around with these frequencies while looking at it, and it will make sense. That's it on the presentation.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, look, that was awesome, Ross. I really found each one of those slides interesting and quite enlightening as well, because it's not an area I know an awful lot about. Yeah. And I know that some of the guys who've been following have had some questions as well. Let me just run through just a couple of them quickly for you.
Yeah, please.
Just one, that was recent, just from the last part. Was is a low cut the same as a low pass filter? Generally speaking, you hear it referred to as a low cut and a high pass filter, right?
But people do use slightly different terminologies on them.
Okie doke.
Yeah.
Cool. Some microphones have built-in pop filters. Are they effective, or would you recommend using an external pop filter?
They definitely are effective to a degree. That's why they're there. I think just use your ears. I mean, a good test, a pop filter really is on certain sounds. So it's normally on your P's and your B's. So if you feel like the microphone isn't, they're still kind of pushing a bit harder, then that's when you want to do it. So that's the test. Your P's and B's. The problem is, otherwise, the temptation is to bring it a bit further away or talk over it to reduce that. But you are obviously impacting the quality of your sound as well. So yeah.
There's some quite technical questions in here that I think we'll answer directly via email. If that's okay. We'll just rather than try and cover them in maybe, I don't want to be reductive just for the sake of time. So that's something. But one question that made me laugh a little bit as we were going along is any tips to ask for what you say to the talent when you're doing a levels check?
What to say?
Yeah.
Well, I think the two things I want is, that's the old. I used to be a sound, working in the music industry. It's always a bit of a joke that sound guys can only count up to 2.
Yeah, sure.
So it's like 1, 2, 1, 2. But actually, weirdly, those 2 sounds actually cover quite a broad range of sounds.
Right.
1's very full. 2 is quite trebly and broad. So I'll normally get them to say 1, 2, 1, 2. And then the next thing is I really encourage people to tell, if you just say, can you do a sound check? They normally don't know what to say at all. They'll normally just go 1, 2, 1, 2, and then they'll run out. So I normally ask them a question. My stock question is I normally just say, tell me what you have for breakfast, or tell me what you did at the weekend. Because actually what you want is you want them to talk for a few minutes, to be honest. And most actors won't give you that unless you set it up for them. So generally I just get into start asking questions.
Cool. One of the questions obviously is, what microphone are you using right now?
What microphone am I using right now? I'm using it's just wedged on my iMac. I'm using the I've got another one here, using a Sennheiser. It's the more cardioid version, which is the another one here, so you can see it. There you go. Can you see that?
Yep.
There you go.
That is the same mic as I'm wearing right now, I think.
There you go. So I've just got it propped in front of me on my little LED light, and I didn't want to touch it right now because it would sound awful in your ears.
Yep.
So yeah.
Cool. Well, the other questions, as I said, they're a little bit more technical. I think I'll get back to these guys individually. So if we haven't answered your question, do apologize. But what we'll do is we'll just drop you an email with a bit more depth to the question.
And can I just apologize to everyone that obviously this thing we do is something we normally do like in a whole day. So if anything's felt a bit disjointed or hard to follow, I've tried to package it into this time frame. So
for all the guys out there, this is Ross's like half-day presentation that we do normally face-to-face with the mics. Trying to transfer it over to an electronic or more virtual sort of base like this is a challenge. But Ross, I think you've risen to that challenge. So
great.
The feedback I'm seeing here is very positive. So
great. Well, I'm happy to wrap. I'm still happy to answer any more if there's any questions you want, and then we can answer them more thoroughly later. Whatever works. If people are bored, I'm happy for them to go and have their tea as well.
It's a response from your question about asking them about what they had for breakfast. One person said that I asked them to recite the alphabet. So that's one way of doing it. Cool. For the rest of the guys on here, we're going to get back to you with any questions that you might have that we haven't answered. And Ross, thank you so much. Let's do this again.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, and if any guys out there have any suggestions about what you'd like to know more about when it comes to audio from Ross or from myself, then please just drop us an email. Remember, it's provideo@wex.co.uk. So, cool. Thanks for everyone watching, and thanks to Ross. See you soon.
Take care, guys.